Anyways, let us get into the tier lists. Pog. Welcome, YouTube, back to the channel. This is going to be a hand trap tier list. The Twitch chat voted. We're going to do the hand trap tier list first. Before we hop right in, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That would mean a lot to me. Thank you in advance for watching and subscribing. And without further ado, we are going to discuss hand traps today for the upcoming format. I will say one thing before we hop into ranking the individual hand traps on how I feel about hand traps in general this format. I think they were very, very inefficient last format, and they become better this format. Last format, the only hand traps you could really play were like Bestials, and maybe you would see an Imperm and a Nibiru sometimes. But for the most part, that was it. And that was mostly because, of course, yeah, Shifter, but like Shifter was a special case. Generally, Tierlist was such an efficient deck that hand traps didn't really feel that great against it. And now Kashtira is still a very efficient deck, but hand traps are a little bit better against it now. Of course, we've heard a lot of talk about like Kashtira is probably the deck to beat moving forward. So that's what we're going to evaluate these hand traps by. How good are they against Kashtira? Bonus points if it also covers Labyrinth, Branded Despia, Sprite, those types of decks, which are kind of like the top 3 to 4 decks right now. So deck to beat, probably Kashtira, but not only that. And hand traps are solid against those decks. I think overall, they're like in an okay position. Board breakers are also pretty strong though. Keep that in mind. Hand traps are not bad this format, but board breakers are also a very strong contender for these non-engine slots in your deck. And now you might want to mix it up, some board breakers and some hand traps, which we're also going to talk about board breakers in a separate tier list. But anyways, I've been talking a lot. Let's get into it. I've kept the categories the same. I think I like these categories. I think I'm going to do these like that from now on. Let us start with a hand trap that I think is just strong right now. Probably one of the most played hand traps at the recent YCS. I'm gonna say it. Ash Blossom is back. It feels weird to say because it never really felt like Ash Blossom was gone. But Ash Blossom is pretty good now because of like the branded matchup. Like it negates branded fusion, and that's pretty freaking broken. Branded does almost nothing if you negate branded fusion. And pair that with the fact that it's just a solid card in all of the other matchups. Like it's not insane against the other decks, but it's good. Like ashing Theosis is solid. Sometimes ashing the field spell is also very good. Ashing any of the welcome Labyrinth traps is also good. It's all right against Sprite. Like ashing Gigantic sometimes works. Ashing Starter is good. It's just overall a solid card now, I think. Your deck might want to play board breakers instead if you're like really confident on your like board breaking capabilities without any hand traps, maybe. But overall, I think Ash is just in a very solid spot right now. I think that's pretty good. Ghost Bell is a card that I'm going to throw into the okay to side category because from my current standpoint, the card only feels good in one particular matchup, and that's branded. The only reason why I would like to play Bell over other cards in that matchup is if I'm afraid of the Gimmick Puppet Nightmare combo. That's annoying. Actually, Bell is also okay against Labyrinth because you can Bell the big Welcome Labyrinth. You cannot Bell the other Welcome Labyrinth, which is why it's a decent bit worse than Ash Blossom, but it can hit the big Welcome Labyrinth. Maybe if you want a card that specifically prevents like branded expulsion locks or branded in red and it negates big Welcome Labyrinth, then maybe Ash is actually a strong side deck card in that case. It overlaps for those two matchups. That's okay. It can work against Runic. However, I'm not a huge fan of belling Runic Fountain because if they have another Runic spell, all the spells stay in the graveyard. And they can just do it again next turn, which is the problem with Ash and Bell in the Runic matchup. But like, it can still be crucial in good spots if they don't have another Runic spell or if you can end the game on that turn. But overall, I think Bell is a solid card. Don't mistake in this category for like Bell isn't good. Bell is definitely solid if for the purposes that it does. Bestials, in my opinion, not very good in the main deck anymore because Tierlist is gone and they are not good against Kashtira and they are not that good in some of the other matchups. But I think people underestimate Bestials a little bit in terms of like, I was looking at the deck lists from the recent YCS and I saw almost no Bestials. The only decks I saw play Bestials was, I think, the branded Bestial decks that wanted to play Bestials because of their engine. I think Bestials are going to return to the side decks at some point. I think they are still very, very good cards in the matchups where you can use them. Like, for example, against Sprite going second, I think Bestials are incredibly strong, specifically Magnum, with just like putting big bodies onto the field that even create card advantage while doing so. That's very good. I think Bestials are very good in the side deck. They also are a very good solution to Branded. They can stop Branded in red. They can stop Branded Expulsion if they leave the stuff in the graveyard. But even if they go for a line where they banish the targets from the graveyard, which is the normal way how Branded can play around Bell, for example, is by using Expulsion to summon the targets from the banished pile, in which case you cannot Bell the card. If they do that and you have a Bestial, they also kind of play around the Bestial, but you can just Bestial the Albion, and then they cannot search the Expulsion. So I think Bestials are very solid cards against Branded. They also have their usage against Labyrinth in the grind games if you get there. If you get Floodgated, they don't help you, but if you get into a grind game against Labyrinth, they can help you, because sometimes they summon stuff back from the graveyard, like the big lady. Like they are not bad if they can like get a +1 out of the whole thing. They are also, I think, very good against Sprite. Like, you cannot prevent Elf with it anymore, but they are still just big bodies, and Sprite has a problem with big bodies that float. They do play into thrusting, but I don't know how popular thrusting is going to be. It doesn't feel like going first. A lot of people will side deck that card. Like, it doesn't feel like that popular of a card, especially for going first. So yeah, that's that. Cherries, as always, hops into the experimental category. Not much to say about Cherries. It seems like there is just always, these days, this one random tool in decks that stops Cherry from being good. For Tierlements, it was the fact that Tierlement's Crime could randomly get back the Tierlement Kid Kalos from their banished pile, and that was annoying. For Branded, it's the fact that they can recycle with Lubellion. For Kashtira, if they manage to banish a Theosis, they can just add back whatever you banish from Cherries. So, like, each of these top decks right now, or most of the top decks, have like that one random niche interaction that invalidate Cherries sometimes. And so that's why I think Cherries isn't that great overall. Of course, you can experiment with it and maybe you can catch some people off guard. But overall, because both Branded and Kashtira have ways to play around it, I don't have that great hopes for Cherries. It's funny how Handtraps that were just so solid last format just suddenly look so mediocre. The only matchup I can really see for DD Crow is Branded, because it can prevent Branded in red or Branded Expulsion. But I think in both of those cases, Bestials just do it better. I don't see a reason to play Crow over Bestials right now. The only thing that it can do is like banish runic spells, but that's very, very mediocre. So I'm not a huge fan of Crow right now. It's not the worst card in the world against Labyrinth, but it's also not that impactful, you know? So I'm not sure about Crow. Droll and Lockbird is probably an okay card. Droll and Lockbird, I feel like, often falls into this category where in certain matchups, it's a very high risk, high reward kind of card, because Kashtira searches a lot of cards and Branded sometimes also does. The problem is that sometimes you Lockbird them and then they simply weren't going to search much anyways afterwards. Let's say they went like Unicorn and then they add Birth, and then dropping the Lockbird right there triggers the Unicorn, and all it does is like stop them from searching one card with Fenrir or something, because that was all they were going to search for the rest of the turn. And sometimes they start with like Prosperity Grab Field Spell and you go Lockbird and their entire hand is dead. So like Lockbird is always that high risk, high reward kind of card, but if it works out, it can be really strong against Kashtira. Like some Kashtira hands after Lockbird just pass. The same goes for Branded. Some people just go like normal summon, Aluber, grab Branded Fusion, and then you Lockbird them and it doesn't really annoy them anyways, because they were just going to activate Branded Fusion and pass after. And sometimes they go for like Allure, Banish Tragedy, activate Tragedy, you chain Lockbird, and the game is just like over because they don't have Branded Fusion yet and they can't search and they have like a dead Patchwork in hand or whatever. So like Lockbird is okay if you like that kind of card, like high risk, high reward, and definitely has its purposes against the current metagame. Gamma, I think, is not bad, but it's had better times. Seems okay to side deck against like Kashtira and Sprite. Not that good against Labyrinth. It's not that good against Branded, even though, I mean, sometimes you just hit Aluber and hope they don't have Branded Fusion. But I think it's fine to side deck Gamma. I don't really think I would main deck Gamma. Oh yeah, Contact C. You are right in chat. I forgot Contact C. Editor, do your magic and put Contact C in the, I'm gonna say, also okay to side category. Contact C seems like it's solid against Branded and also solid against Kashtira. It has a lot of ifs attached to it. It saw a lot of play in Vegas, and I don't agree with the high play rate that it saw. Like, I don't think it's that good. For example, we saw not that much Lancea seeing play, And that card, I think, is very strong. I think people played it a lot more than they should have. They were like trying to try it out or catch people off guard. But I think a lot of the branded players that were successful had answers to Contact C because they played the Sprint, for example. So it will never lock out people completely. And the same goes for Kashtira. Very often, you can Contact C them and then they can maybe still tribute over it or something. It's annoying for them, so like it'll always do something. I don't think it will auto win you the game very often. So I think it's an okay side card. I think you could definitely go for it. Hiding C, I just thought for a second that had potential against Kashtira, but then chat reminded me that just a Rise Heart just banishes it. So I was like, yeah, Fenrir can't banish it, and so it outs the board. But no, they have a Rise Heart. They'll just banish it. So it'll just bait the Rise Heart banish, but they probably still have 3 materials for next turn. So nah, this card's unfortunately not very good. Chaos Hunter, I guess, is like I guess Lancea and Chaos Hunter go into like the same vein, kind of, where like Chaos Hunter against Kashtira is okay because it stops them from banishing. It's a little risky because it's a level 7. If this card was level 6 or level 8, it would be a lot better because it wouldn't risk like, oh, they might have talents and just take it and XYZ summon with it, and that's awful for me. With level 7, you kind of lose to talents or thrusting into talents. But other than that, it's quite solid. I don't know if it's better than Lancea though, but you can try it. Lancea is the first one I'm going to throw in strong side because it's just like, I think this card is very underestimated against Kashtira, which is weird because a lot of people played it last format, and then everyone is changing to other hand traps. But I'm not sure if I agree. I think Lancea is pretty solid overall because it just like, there's cards like Nibiru, which we're going to talk about Nibiru in a bit. Nibiru is good against Kashtira if they play into it. Other board breakers are good into Kashtira if they play into that specific board breaker. Like, for example, I don't know, Book of Eclipse, if they don't have Lance, is very good. If they don't lock all your spell and trap zones, it's really good. There's really no if attached to Lancea, and that's what I like about it. Lancea will always do what it does. It will always stop their turn. Like, they cannot possibly make a zone lock happen under Artifact Lancea. They cannot touch your extra deck under Artifact Lancea. They cannot use Rise Heart under Lancea. They simply can't. So like, Lancea is a very consistent hand trap. And that's what I like about it. That's what I really like about it. It's very consistent. It's not as amazing, of course, as Nibiru if it works. If Nibiru works, it feels amazing, like adrenaline out of the wazoo. But Lancea is very consistent, and I like that. I think that's worth something. Speaking of consistent hand traps, Imperm is pretty good. I think it's worse than Ash now because of Branded in the format. But Imperm, specifically against Kashtira, is not exactly the same as Lancea, but it has the same dynamic where it's just always going to do something. It's never terrible. It's just a very consistent hand trap. It's worth noting that Branded can now sometimes outplay Imperm because Cartesia can dodge it as a quick effect. That's something, but I still think overall Imperm is solid. Also, you can like, in every matchup right now, you can probably keep Imperm in your hand if you don't find a good spot to use it because your opponent plays around it. You can always keep Imperm in your hand until your turn and use it on your turn efficiently. Negate the Arise Heart, negate the Mirror Jade, negate one of the Sprite end board cards because there's no Elf anymore. Whatever they end on, you can Imperm. Like, you can Imperm IP in the draw phase, you can Imperm Ginbuster, Imperm Red, Imperm Carrot to bait it. It's a solid card. Also, because I see it now in chat, the amount of people, last time I freaking posted a hand trap tier list, the amount of people that asked me, where is Kurikara, makes me really question, like, it's not a hand trap. Kurikara is not a hand trap. Kurikara will be in the board breaker tier list. Anyways, moving on. I guess Mourner and Veiler after Imperm. I've seen, for example, I saw one list that played Mourner in the main deck. I think it was Raphael Nevin at YCS Vegas. He just played a lot of, he played a lot of hand traps, no board breakers. Maybe because he was afraid of getting zone locked out of using the board breakers. I think it's fine. I don't hate Mourner and Veiler this format. It's just in comparison to Ash and Imperm, they feel really mid. Like, I'm happy about Ash and Imperm in my deck. If I, like, maybe I want to play board breakers instead, but I'm not unhappy if I'm playing Ash and Imperm. Mourner and Veiler, I feel like, are a little bit more situational and a little bit more mediocre a lot of the time. So I think if you want to go for a full hand trap approach, go for it. And then you probably want Mourner and Veiler. But overall, I'm not convinced that that's the way to go. Like, personally, I much prefer like a healthy mix of non-engine right now. If I have like Ashe and Imperm, maybe Nibiru, and then I pair that up with a couple of board breakers. I think that's a better approach than going full on hand traps. Cover your ears, Paulo, don't listen. But I think full hand traps, like 15, 18 hand traps, isn't that great. So yeah, but like if you want to do that, then these would probably be solid. Nibiru is at the very minimum here, but I want to say it's strong to main deck Nibiru because... So my theory is that the top decks, Kashtira, Sprite, and Branded, those decks can play around Nibiru, but if they do that, their board gets significantly worse. If I play against Kashtira and I have Nibiru in my hand, the worst case scenario is I'm gonna have to face an Arise Heart. And I can maybe deal with that with the other 5 cards in my hand. What I can't deal with is if they go for the full combo, lock all my zones and whatnot. I probably can't deal with that. And so Nibiru is kind of like you hedge your bets, right, in the main deck. Like if they play around Nib, then their board is weaker. If they don't play around Nib, you have the chance of really punishing them. And that's what I like Nib for. I think it's fine to main deck Nibiru in this upcoming format. I think it also depends a little bit on how the numbers shift. Because of course, Sprite, for example, if that deck ever comes back at more power, like currently it's not seeing that much play, I feel like, which I'm personally disappointed by, but it might just be... Maybe people haven't found the right version yet. Maybe it's just not as good. We'll have to see. But Sprite is one of the decks that plays around Nibiru very efficiently because of Gigantic and Red. So if that's the case, if there's more Sprite, then you don't want to play Nibiru. It also depends a little bit on what kind of branded combos people do, because there is certain branded combos that play into Nibiru. There's also certain branded combos that don't play into Nibiru. I think Nibiru will, throughout the course of this metagame, like fade in and out of deck lists every once in a while, and you just have to make the right call. Are people playing into it right now? Then I should probably have it. Are people not playing into it right now? Then I should probably not have it. It's not a simple answer as to, yeah, it's always going to be strong. Or because if everyone plays Nibiru, people are not going to play into Nibiru anymore. But yeah, it's kind of the dynamic of Nibiru. Ghost Ogre isn't awful, I think. It's like not good against Labyrinth. Not that good against Branded. Against Kashtira, there is spots for it, but they're not very good spots. I don't know, hitting a Rise Heart, they lose a level 7. I don't like it. It's probably not very good. The more I think about it, I don't think there's very good spots for it in the top decks right now, unfortunately. Shifter will be a side deck card in this format. I'm telling you right now, I don't think Shifter has a lot of purpose in the main deck because Kashtira is part of the format, and not just part of the format, but like probably the most represented deck for the next couple of weeks. I think Shifter doesn't have a place in the main deck. It's also not that good against some of the other decks. There's no tier limit right now that completely crumbles under Shifter. Like, yeah, the branded plays can become a little bit weird under Shifter, but they're not dead. The Sprite plays, if they play like the Nimble package with Sprint, the Sprite plays become a little bit worse, but they're not as bad still. Like, you can still do something. There's no deck that outright just dies to Shifter, except for maybe like Dark World or whatever. I think Shifter is a good side deck card to cover for those random rogue matchups that just need the graveyard, right? If anyone still tries to cope on Tierlist, if anyone tries to play Dark World, if anyone plays whatever deck that needs the graveyard, like certain runic variations too, like Runic Naturia has a problem with Shifter. For those decks, I think it's a very good side deck card, but for the main deck purpose, I think it's not very good. And then last but not least, Skullmeister. Nah. Just nah. Tier is gone, so say goodbye to Skullmeister and Crow, in my opinion. And that's already it. Like I said, Contact C, Power of Editing is now also in the tier list. Everything else is board breakers, which I'm also very excited about talking about. So we're gonna do the board breaker tier list next. Without further ado, that is it. I hope that gave you some insight. As always, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I hope you enjoyed watching. Say goodbye to YouTube, chat. And I will see you guys for the board breaker tier list. I'll see you next time, and bye bye.